Welcome back again to Last Week I Watched. I'm Mark and I watch and review movies and TV shows to help you decide if they're worth your time or not. So this week I want to talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Void, Our Man in Italy, The Boys Season 3, The Grey Man, and House of Gucci. So let's talk about them. Okay, first up is Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's from 2022, starring Michelle Yeoh, Ki Hai Kwan, and Stephanie Su, and it's showing on Apple. With her laundromat teetering on the point of failure and her marriage to wimpy husband Waymond, played by Kwan, on the rocks, overworked Evelyn Wang, played by Yeoh, struggles to cope with everything, including a tattered relationship with her judgmental father Gong Gong and Joy, her daughter. As if her personal crisis isn't enough, she must also face a meeting with an IRS auditor that might potentially send her laundromat under. As the stern agent loses patience, an inexplicable multiverse rift forces Evelyn to face herself in multiple realities and prevent an evil entity from destroying all of reality. So the central conceit of this film, that the multiverse is real and different versions of the same person is crossing over, it gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. They do make some efforts to try and explain it as they go, which is good, and it's got some really amazing imagery. But it's actually all icing on what is a relatively simple family story, I guess, involving a family under stress, struggling with life, dealing with depression, and ultimately trying to find some meaning in life when it all seems pointless. But the film has plenty of things going on as Evelyn fends off incursions from other realities, resulting in kung fu fights, sci-fi elements as she learns to travel the multiverse and access her other selves, and fantastic elements such as the threatening Bagel of Doom, while trying to find her own meaning in life and patch up her relationships with her family. The alternate realities are fun, especially some of the more outlandish ones, such as the sausage-fingered people, the rock dimension, and the Rakakuni. The film has a really strong cast and they all do a great job. It's particularly great to see Ki Hai Kwan back. He is otherwise known as Data from the Goonies, and Short Round from Indiana Jones' Temple of Doom. Michelle Yeoh does a great job navigating all the chaos, and interestingly, one of her alternate selves is the action film star, which is basically just who she is. Jamie Lee Curtis also is great as Deirdre, the IRS officer, in a role that is not particularly glamorous or flattering, and her collection of trophies from her years in the IRS was particularly amusing to us. Cool to also see James Hong again as Gong Gong. He's basically film royalty at this point. He's been in so many different things, so it's really great to see him still going strong as Evelyn's father. I had a really good time with this. It's a real mashup of ideas and genres, and it lets them tackle, I think, some big concepts like nihilism, but it ultimately helps to put things in perspective, that when there's too much bullshit and it's all too hard, that just being present and finding the beauty in the little things restores the spice to life. I highly recommend you give it a watch. Hang in there, it does make sense in the end, but you do need to give it your full attention. It's not the kind of movie you can sort of half-ass and sort of watch with one eye while surfing on your phone, especially as characters lapse in and out of English and subtitles will appear. So check it out. Okay, next up is The Void. It's from 2016, starring Aaron Paul, Kenneth Walsh, and Alan Wong. It was showing on Apple. So when Sheriff Deputy Carter, played by Paul, discovers a blood-soaked man limping down a deserted road, he rushes him to a local hospital with bare-bones night shift staff. As cloaked cultists surround the building, the patients and staff inside start to turn ravenously insane, and trying to protect the survivors, Carter leads them into the depths of the hospital where they discover a gateway to immense evil. So I hunted this one down because I'd heard it had some really good practical effects, and it's in the Lovecraft genre, so that was interesting to me. Even though it was a low-budget film, in fact it was crowd-funded, it's still shot very well and it looks pretty good. The hospital looked a little odd though, and the lack of patients and equipment is explained in the plot as the hospital is being decommissioned, but in actuality it was apparently an old school, so That was interesting. The cast do a pretty good job, and the film gradually ramps up the tension and the horror as the evening descends into nightmare. The cultists look great too in their white robes. They're very striking, with just a black triangle where the face should be. It's quite an iconic look and very menacing. Surprisingly, there's a reasonably decent story hiding in here, with family tragedy leading the Doctor to experiment with more esoteric ways to turn back death. With his band of cultists, he plans to open up a portal to whatever dimension he's been communicating with and transform people to bring them back to life, just not as they were. It very much leans into Lovecraft tropes with the alternate dimension, black magic, and sort of overall slide into madness. There's some really great body horror, and the practical gore and effects look great. There's also some really creepy and disturbing work on display, and it reminded me of sort of classic Stuart Gordon Lovecraft films like Reanimator and From Beyond. Although there's definitely a splash of The Thing in there as well with some of the creature work. Overall, I really enjoyed it. Expectations weren't that high, but it actually turned out to be a pretty good horror with some great effects and some interesting ideas. I like that it's left deliberately mysterious. There's no attempt to explain the Great Black Pyramid in the other dimension. It's just there. Make up your own mind about what it's all about. It's more than likely so terrible it would break your mind anyway, especially if the elder gods lurk within. Check it out. Okay, next up is James May, Our Man in Italy. It's from 2022, starring, surprisingly, James May, and it was showing on Prime. So in this one, James May travels across Italy. This is similar to his previous travelogue where he explored Japan, but in this one he travels across Italy, if you're starting to pick up on the theme. Starting in Sicily and working his way up the coast to Naples, Rome, Tuscany, and eventually ending up in Venice. Along the way, he tries local foods and wines, takes in some culture, and occasionally makes an ass of himself. It's usually pretty obvious which activities the producers have forced on him. He's not shy in expressing his displeasure at canoe polo, for instance, and certain situations such as the wine tasting had me hoping that maybe Clarkson would pop up, considering he likes the tipple, but sadly there aren't any appearances from the other two. I'm probably not alone in wishing those three would do a travelogue together, maybe with cars, maybe more grand tour. Anyway, it's interesting to see the very beautiful Italian locations and experience the culture a little bit. Hopefully one day when COVID is finally under control, we'll be able to travel safely again. We were planning a European adventure before the pandemic, so it's been a bit frustrating. But at least we can watch this and see which locations we might want to visit in the future, or what things there are to do there. So if you're interested in seeing Italy, check it out. Okay, next up is The Boys Season 3. It's from 2022, starring Carl Urban, Anthony Starr, and Jack Quaid. It's showing on Prime. So overall, the show is about a group of vigilantes. They're set out to take down superheroes who abuse their powers. This is based on the graphic novels of the same name by Garth Ennis. Continuing the story from last season, Vought, the corporation that runs the superheroes, is doing damage control after the Nazi revelations of Stormfront and I guess the origins of Vought. While continuing their sort of government manipulations behind the scenes to install superpowered people into the military and sort of take control, I guess. Homelander is becoming increasingly unhinged as his superiority complex rages unchecked. He's basically this show's version of Superman, if Superman was basically a massive egomaniac / psychopath with massive daddy issues. Butcher searches for a way to finish off Homelander once and for all, leading him to accidentally release a completely new and more terrifying threat. As usual, the superheroes are just regular people that have been given superpowers by Vought, and because they are arrogant, selfish, and spoiled by Vought, and just not great at their cause, and the powers largely amplify what's sort of already inside anyway, it just enables them to be sort of the maximum amount of terrible that they can be. They're almost uniformly terrible. There is the occasional exception, but it largely comes down to who you are at the core, and this season really hammers that home as our non-powered characters start to flirt with power by way of Temp V and the consequences that brings. There's also some quite notorious scenes from the novel, such as Herogasm in this season, which is an annual superhero orgy. The show is not shy in leaning hard into some of the more shocking or controversial elements, and the season is no exception, with a superhero called Termite accidentally exploding a person after shrinking down and crawling up his penis to give pleasure. And this is in episode 1, so buckle up, it can get pretty over the top. The ensemble cast, they continue to do a great job with the characters, and the show is fleshing out their backstories, and they all have an arc across the season as well. There's a few new characters, and it seems likely that Soldier Boy, their version of Captain America, will likely reappear again at some point. Overall, the show continues to subvert the superhero genre, showing a much more likely world if superheroes were real. We'd all like to believe that superheroes would do the right thing and be there to help us, but it's more likely they'd use their superiority to dominate us. And this season felt like this series' Empire Strikes Back, with the boys experiencing a bit of a defeat by the end. So it'll be interesting to see how they come back from this. It's worth a look if you're into the superhero genre and are okay with being challenged by the more adult content. This is definitely not one for the kiddies. Do not let them watch it. But if you're an adult, by all means, check it out. Okay, next up is The Grey Man. It's from 2022, starring Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas. It's showing on Netflix. So this is based on the novel by the same name by Mark Greaney, and the film is intended to start a franchise based on the series of Grey Man novels. Consequently, Netflix really went all in on this with a budget of $200 million for this action/spy film to run around the globe. It's got a great cast and plenty of great looking action sequences, but like The Grey Man of the title, something feels kind of off with the film. It's grey, bland and largely forgettable, and I think the problem is it's all very deadly serious, and ultimately it doesn't seem to have any sort of fun. Everyone is very dour and serious, except for Chris Evans, who seems to be enjoying chewing the scenery as the psychopathic bad guy. I'm starting to wonder if he's really trying to purge his Captain America persona, as he seems to be taking bad guy roles lately. He's actually kind of colourful, even though he's a really nasty piece of work. That's not to say that the other actors aren't good, which they are, but they're all just kind of there, and they're similar, and there's just not a lot of variety, and everyone's just very, very serious all the time. I also think the script suffers from all the usual sort of spy tropes. Man recruited from prison to become a government killer, check, La Femme Nikita. Betrayed by other corrupt government employee, throw a rock and hit a spy thriller. Global contract killers unleashed against him, John Wick. It's fine to use these tropes, but it really needed to do something to distinguish itself and bring something original to the events. And it just doesn't really do that. So, after watching the movie, I had to go online and read the plot synopsis because I also felt like I wasn't understanding something or had missed something. What was on the encrypted drive? Turns out it was less exciting than unexpected. It was just some data showing how the government douchebag in the piece was corrupt. Honestly, he could have just called in a Reaper strike and flattened the building from the outset and destroyed the data. Sure, there would have been collateral damage, but having kill squads roaming around the globe trying to get this person and killing innocent bystanders and things seemed a lot more messy than maybe just having an explosion occur and then pinning it to terrorism, say. Film done 20 minutes. At any rate, a 2-hour-plus movie shouldn't be bland or confusing. It didn't even seem to end with any real resolution either, so I'm assuming that the government weasel will be back in subsequent sequels, assuming any get made. I'm guessing if they do it, it will likely be with a much smaller budget, but overall I think it was frustratingly disappointing. I got bored with it a few times, I turned it off, and that's not something I expected from an action spy thriller. Unfortunately, it's just not Bond or Bourne, it's more like a related cousin twice removed. I hope if it gets another go, I hope they can inject some fun and personality into the characters and sort of give them an actual arc. If you want to check it out, though, just go in with your expectations set low. Okay, finally is House of Gucci. It's from 2021, starring Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, Al Pacino, showing on Prime. So when Patrizia Reggiani, played by Gaga, marries into the Gucci family, her relentless ambition begins to unravel their legacy and triggers a spiral of betrayal, decadence, revenge, and ultimately murder. This is based on the 2001 book The House of Gucci, a sensational story of murder, madness, glamour and greed by Sarah Gray Forden. I didn't know of anything about this going into it, but I wanted to check it out purely based on the talk that the performances were particularly unhinged. I wasn't really that interested in Gucci or a fashion movie as such. Fortunately, it's more like a real-world Game of Thrones writ small. When Papa Gucci passes on, the family really kick into high gear to maneuver and take over the Gucci Gucci empire. Patrizia works by getting her hooks into Mauricio, played by Driver. Despite warning from Papa Gucci, played by Irons, she manipulates him into taking a more active role in the business despite his disinterest and desire to avoid the family games. And she does a really great job in the film conveying the subtext to Patrizia subtly. She's sweet when she wants to be, but always in service of her ambition. The supporting cast are also great, with perhaps one exception. The one role that just seems so over the top is Jared Leto as Paolo, who is so ridiculously pitiful that I could understand why Aldo was disappointed in him and favours Maurizio, but he's so emotional and over the top that he veers solidly into parody. He's almost like the village idiot or something. There's no way the real Paolo could have been that ridiculous and still be a functional human being. Apparently he was a bit eccentric, but he was the chief designer at Gucci in the 60s, so he can't have been that dysfunctional, surely. Leto always seems to be trying to upstage everyone in his roles. Honestly, I think he's at his best when he dials it down a bit. Like, he was quite good in Blade Runner, but his Joker was just too much. Paolo's daughter commented that she still feels offended at Leto's performance, and he went on to win the coveted Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Supporting Actor for this. So, yeah, make of that what you will. The film looks great, and the period setting is appropriate and well done. As usual, it's a Ridley Scott film, so you're expecting it's going to look good. As the infighting progresses and Reggiani pushes too hard, she actually manages to push Maurizio away. And while the story is simplified, they had 2 children by the time they divorced. Film only had 1. It ultimately turns unhinged when she hires a hitman to exact her revenge on Maurizio. The story leans hard into family infighting and ultimately greed. The real Gucci family were disappointed not to be consulted about the film, but Gucci did open up their archives to contribute clothing, etc. for the film. I guess with any sort of biopic, it's a real balancing act to portray a true story over an extended period of time in a 2-hour movie, so stuff gets compressed and simplified, but I think they did a good job with this film. Sure, some of the acting slides into melodrama, but I do think that's actually kind of true about the mechanics of families, so there's always some kind of infighting or manipulation, and once you throw in a massive amount of money and power, it's bound to go horribly wrong. Ironically, Gucci went onto great success today, just without any actual Gucci's anymore. So it's worth a watch, check it out. Okay, so those are my suggestions for this week. I hope they are of some interest to you. Check them out. As always, leave any comments below and let me know what you thought, or if you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them down there. And please click on the like and subscribe so I can let you know when the next video comes out. Somewhere on screen also will be my Twitter account link. I tweet while I'm watching things, so if you want to come on and tweet at me or comment on things or talk about films, feel free to tweet at me. Alright, enjoy some films and TV, stay safe out there, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks for watching. Bye now.